In the Quran, there are a few passages where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And when he gives him the good news and glad tidings of having a child, Ishaq alayhi salam, after a very long period of time. And when his wife, Sara, hears this news, she is astonished, she's surprised, she's shocked. When you read those passages in Surah Hud and at the end of Adh-Dhariyat, what do you feel? What emotions do you experience? What thoughts come to your mind?
The first thought that comes to mind as I think about those ayahs is actually the story going back to Surah Maryam. And when you look at the very similar story of Zakaria alayhi salatu wasalam, all of these stories and even du'as that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has preserved in the Quran, He's preserved as a lesson for us. For these prophets to go through a similar difficulty and the extent of that difficulty reminds us about our orientation towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when we're desperately praying for something.
In terms of like the order of the ayat is when these two strangers came to Ibrahim alayhi salam, they met him with the greeting of peace, and Ibrahim alayhi salam is like, oh, two random strangers just showed up to my house. He says, all right, let me bring them some food. So like the hospitality, the care and concern they had for anyone and everyone, right?
And these were prophets, right? These were the people who were most concerned for their ummah and most concerned for the guidance of their people. And so when I think about that, and then we think about all of either the difficulties in our lives, the desires that we have, the hopes, the aspirations that we have, it reminds us, right, that the answer to our du'as comes when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants it to come, and that we never lose hope in that. And this reminds us, right, of even like all of these stories of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam when they're given this news of a glad tiding. But even when their son Ismail alayhi salatu wasalam is being taken from them in that test that he's given.
The amount of trials that this family had to go through, and after all of that, Allah blesses them with a child. And in terms of receiving the news of Ishaq alayhi salam, it just brings one to tears and really shows the emotion, the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes it. It says that Sara alayhi salam is like a barren old woman. How can I have a child? It's not possible anymore.
That all of these people and these great, prophets of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam, these great scholars, ulama rahimahumullah, that we learn from their lessons that when something afflicts them, right, or something is given to them, regardless of what it is, that they are content with that.
So much. Ibrahim alayhi salam went through so many tests and trials that it's hard to even imagine how he was able to get through his life. In the dream, he was told, you have to sacrifice your son. So it's just like processing that. I can't even imagine how he was able to process that and how he feels. Just the qadr of Allah and how amazing these people were.
Say, for example, you were leading Isha prayer one night, there's no one here, and you recited those verses from Hud and Adh-Dhariyat, and then after Salah, you happen to come across an elderly auntie, and it happens to be Sara, right? What would your reaction be, and what would you say to her?
This is a very difficult one thing, because there will be words that come on the tongue, and then there's the actual reality of that, right? If that were ever to happen, there's the reactions that you would expect.
I'd probably just stand there speechless for some time, just trying to process it. If I was able to gain the courage to even speak, the first thing would be just kind of expressing to her how much I have learned and how much her story and her tribulations and trials and difficulties in life have helped me to become a better Muslim.
But the more real reality that would probably settle on many of us, including first and foremost myself, would be likely embarrassment. For a few reasons. That number one, who are you to be leading these people? When the reality is that we're not the people many times of righteousness, right, or sidq, that are standing in front, but there are people who their states are veiled from us, who are behind us, who we might be leading. And in this case, right, if it's somebody like Sara alayhi salatu wasalam, that you're leading a person like that, right, and like, it would be embarrassment, right, to realize that you're being put in front, but in being put in front, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala really giving you something, or is He depriving you of something?
Sara alayhi salam, being the wife of the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, her rank and status is so high. It's just imagining meeting someone is very hard, and especially being able to have a one-on-one conversation. But I feel if through hearing about what she went through in terms of her tawakkul, her sabr, and after that just asking her like what do you advise me to do to be able to even try to scratch that surface of
Get to that
piety
level.
and get to the level.
Like, what's the secret to it?
Exactly. Get to that level and try to draw as close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as I possibly can.
But in reality, you would hope it would be one of joy, right? Immense joy that you get to meet these great people. Right? Alayhi salatu wassalam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unite us, with all of these righteous and the Anbiya alayhi salatu wassalam on Yawm al-Qiyamah, and actually be able to experience
And
this,
meet them.
right?
And speak with them and interact with them.
And not deprive us of that.
Let's say she asks you a question and she says that, I made dua for something that was seemingly impossible and Allah granted it to me. Is there anything you made dua for that you felt was impossible and you received it?
Throughout my journey of Hifdh, alhamdulillah, I was able to complete it, but there were so many times where I'd go home after not passing my lesson, crying, upset, and just in my mind, it's just, in my head, I'm like, how I can't even do this. How am I going to get there? One of the biggest things my parents always instilled in me is pray for what you want, make dua sincerely. The day I finished my Hifdh was one like no other.
You can't describe the feelings.
Can't describe the feeling.
والنعمة لك والملك لا شريك لك